This is Charles Darwin and natural selection, so this will kind of help with your project you're working on right now. What were early ideas about the process of evolution? We talked about Lamarck, and basically what he said was most used body structures develop. So in the case of the giraffes, they needed to develop to eat the food, so they developed these long necks that were passed on. Once a structure was modified, like the neck, it was inherited. It was passed down from generation to generation, carrying on that long neck, right? So if we look at Charles Darwin, here's Darwin's picture. He said there's variety in a population, so that's why these all have different long necks. Most helpful adaptation leads to survival. So depending on where the resources are, that's what will pass on into the future to be the most fit to survive. And offspring inherit that trait. Whose theory is used today? Well, theory of natural selection is supported by DNA evidence, observations, what we look at and see, and fossil records. When we look at evolution, widely considered the basis for understanding biology. So we look at Darwin's theory, and we, for example, here are his birds. We have butterflies here. So we have variation, competition, adaptation, and selection. So we're looking at genetic understanding, DNA swapping, and bacteria. So when we look at Darwin, who's the father of evolution, we talked about him being 16, and that we didn't talk about he was in medical school and flunked out at 16. That's pretty young. 1831, he went to Cambridge. He traveled 5 years on the Beagle. We did talk about that, and he studied fossils. We talked about that. He went to the Galapagos Islands, where he studied the turtles and he studied the birds. What he looked at, variation in different species, microevolution, meaning small changes. Change was gradual, not instantaneous, so we'll see how this bird evolved through these different shapes of beak here. He proposed that organisms evolved as a result of natural selection. So natural selection is talking about things being selected because of their ability to survive. All life came from a single organism called speciation. His book, Origin of Species, helped outline his theories. And adaptation is something that we need to know. That is in our project. Inherited traits that increase the chances of survival. Remember, adaptation is talking about evolution. Adaptation, either adapt or die. And that's really what it comes down to. So you inherit the traits that help you survive in the environment. It comes from your genetic variability, which means that variations in the genetic makeup helps you survive each generation. We have variation from meiosis, meaning sexual reproduction, which is where we get, if we have multiple offspring, we have more variety, more chances of having those successful traits for adaptation to occur. And what is natural selection? It's favoring the most fit to survive. So it's called survival of the fittest. The best suited for the environment at the time are going to be the ones who survive. Being able to withstand things that are happening at the time, and a drought or lack of food or cold or hot, whatever may be the environment, it's who's suited best to survive it. 4 factors that drive natural selection are overpopulation, variation, competition, survival of the fittest. So when we look at natural selection, we're talking about mutations that occur and which ones are favorable or not. Favorable means that they're good to keep going. Unfavorable means you don't want them. The more offspring you have, the more it's a great strategy to have those variety of genetic sequences, different organisms. Each one of these have their own genetic code, so that's giving you more variation in your genetic makeup of your offspring to help you carry on your heritage. But this leads to competition and limiting factors, meaning food, water, habitat. So in the case of overpopulation, it could be bad if the resources are limited, or it could be good for passing on traits to help your species survive. How is variation related to natural selection? Individual populations have different versions and traits. So we saw the birds that look different. We now look at these pictures of the tiger, and we see that they're all different. They're different because they passed on different traits. No different than you have siblings and none of you look the same unless you are identical. And the thing is, many of these are adaptations, and each one of these that help them be the most fit to survive. We must have genetic variability. Remember, we talked about if you're not having any kind of evolution over time, then nothing happens. Things just stay stagnant and things die because they are not mutating in order to adapt. We must have natural selection, which means we have to have genetic variability. And like I said, if no variation, then nothing changes. What is survival of the fittest? Remember, it's the best organism to adapt to the environment. If you don't adapt, you die. For example, if I didn't wear a coat when it was sub-0 degrees outside, I would freeze to death. Well, I know to wear a coat. Our pets and other animals, when in the winter, they end up having a thicker coat. For example, bears hibernate. Squirrels stow away their nuts to have food when they need it. So organisms learn how to adapt to their environment, and if they don't, they die. And hopefully, as we continue to evolve, which means evolving, carrying on the best variations of our genetic code to be the best fit to stay alive. Okay, reproduce more because we live longer, meaning our genetics is passed on. Pass the favorable traits, which is adaptation to the offspring. What are we passing on to help them survive? Traits increase in the population because we are surviving. We're the most fit. And it leads evolution because the most fit is what's passed on, being able to survive the environment. Okay, so here is kind of an idea. This kind of lays out a little bit like your project. You have genetic variation, overpopulation, struggle to survive, differential survival and reproduction, change in gene pool, natural selection. So this is, you have similar ideas to go into your cartoon that you're making. But take a look at these. We've already discussed what they are. This gives you an idea what it looks like. Gene variation, see how they're not all the same. We're showing variation existing in turtles because some are green and some are tan. Overpopulation, struggle for survival. The turtles always have more offspring than their environment can support. Now all the turtles will survive. So they have hundreds of babies and only a few survive because they're picked off by predators, which has to happen or we'd have overpopulation of turtles and not enough food for them to survive. Differential survival and reproduction. For the birds, the green turtles are easier for it to see than the tan ones because of camouflage. Again, some of us talked about bears. Brown bears don't seem to be a very good fit for being able to stay hidden. So, one adaptation they may want to consider, or genetics, is somebody said spots. That'd be great because then those spots could turn into color, and then the color could turn into maybe a tan bear that can hide in the woods. Change in gene pool. How the tan turtles survive longer because of camouflage, they're able to reproduce. So this is a trait that you want to carry on. If camouflage is how I survive, I get rid of the green and turn brown, right? Change in gene pool. How the fittest of tan turtles, over time the alleles increase in the gene pool, meaning that less and less green turtles exist. And natural selection is saying all we have left is the tan turtles. Green is obsolete. We get rid of green because it picks us off. We can't carry on our lineage with this being green. So that kind of gives you an idea of natural selection. What are the results of natural selection? Favorable traits will increase in the population. Some species will become extinct because they are not able to adapt or die. So they die. New species will emerge. Look at this nice camouflage of these animals here. Look at that. You can see the owl, the butterfly. I'm not sure what type that is, but here's a frog and there's a spider. Does he blend well? Maybe he might consider what? Living in the summer, maybe he blends in because it's a dark color, but in the winter stands out, right? Now, if we look here, we're seeing the extinction. We have several things that are starting to go extinct, and that's a problem. We don't want to lose, because if we go back to what we learned at the beginning of the year, that we're all in a food web. We're all linked to one another, and losing one kind of collapses everything else. So we don't want that to happen, but based on evolution, it does, because only the fit survive. What are 3 types of selection patterns of natural selection? We have stabilizing, we have directional, and we have disruptive. Stabilizing, the average phenotype, remember phenotype is what it looks like, average baby weight. So when we look at these pictures over here, they have them identified for you. There's directional, diversifying, and stabilizing. So here's your stabilizing, which is the average phenotype is selected and average baby weight. So this is the baby weight average right here. Directional one, extreme phenotype is selected. Brown moths instead of white. So directional's here. So we're looking at these mice being selected over these mice. Disruptive, 2 extremes are selected. Here to here are extremes, right? And that's diversifying. Oh, we didn't talk about disruptive, did we? Oh. It looks like diversifying and disruptive is going to be the same thing, so keep that in mind. Natural selection controversy. Candidates contradicts the common religious belief about the formation of life, creationism. Doesn't explain the formation of complex biochemical systems, blood clotting, vision, and the immune system. There's fossil records missing. There's no transitional fossils. So we have fossils from well before, like in dinosaur age, and then we lose them for a very long time, and now we're here. DNA evidence is extremely complicated and it may not have linear connections. Yeah, DNA sequences are millions of base pairs long, so they're difficult to connect to each organism. Show microevolution, but not macroevolution. So you see small evolution over time, but you don't see that large evolution over time. So where in the world did we use the use of our third molars, our wisdom teeth, or where in the world did we lose the use of our appendix? Those times we don't see those macroevolutions. We see small evolutions at a time. Modern science and its current theory on natural selection. You can see some videos down here. But we're looking at the first organism on the planet was bacteria, microorganisms. And what they do is they're able to take up the DNA and change it. So what they do here is they inject their DNA into our cells, and they're able to evolve, just like with COVID. It's not going away because it's able to survive by creating these mutations.